You know what time it is. You know what time it is.
How firm thy friendship. Oh, how
you know what time it is. I'm raw with them boys of the fall. You know what time it is. On the ground with a nose for the ball. You know what time it is. Blood, sweat, and them tears for this game. Leaving it all out on the field with no fear for you lames. Yeah, you know what time it is. Come brawl with them boys of the fall. Covered in gray and scarlet, massive, stiff arms to your jaw. We breaking it. We sick of seeing you clowns with the crown. We taking it.
What up, Buckeye Nation? Welcome to the Buckeye Boys, where we talk about college football with real fans. I'm Devin, and I'm pretty pumped and excited to introduce Austin, one of my best friends from the Teen Challenge Center. How you doing tonight, Austin?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man, for sure. I just want to let everybody know, as you can see by the shirt, we're gonna start this conversation off about Jesus and about Teen Challenge, because there's not going to be any blasphemy in that conversation. But when we get into the football side of the things, I am very sorry, Ohio State fans. It might not go the way that we want it to go, but that's okay, man. He doesn't have on a certain shirt that I just wouldn't allow on this channel. It just wouldn't happen. I don't think he would ever put that shirt on, which is this one here. So
no, we're in agreement there. Michigan does suck. We can agree on that.
I love it, man. Chat, you know what to do, man. Hit that like button for us. Hop in the chat if you haven't already. And do me a favor, man. Share this feed on your X account, your Instagram, your Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Well, you guys heard me tell my testimony yesterday on the show. You heard me talk about Teen Challenge and how important that was in my walk through Jesus. You heard me bring up Austin's name, how important God used him in my walk with Jesus and the specific incident I brought up there. And you guys have also heard me talk about where our super chats go or will go. I explained how that's kind of operating. But half of our super chats go to Teen Challenge, Austin. So I wanted to bring you on and kind of let people get to know you a little bit, tell us a brief testimony, and then we'll kind of dive in to let some people know like what Teen Challenge is, where is their super chats going when they give those to us.
Yeah. So like Devin said, my name's Austin McElroy. Ironically, I became a Gator fan. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, right in the heart of Vol country. So, I mean, I was a rebel early on. I had grandparents in the state of Florida, and, always knew I was going to swim upstream. And my grandfather was a huge Gator fan. And that was back in the, Danny Werfel, Steve Spurrier, air raid offense, one of the first teams that was throwing it all over the yard. So it was just way more exciting to watch than the Johnny Majors, Phil Fulmer, Little Man Stewart, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And so I just kind of, hung with the Gators the rest of my tenure. I was ridiculed growing up. It would essentially be, a Michigan fan right in the center of Columbus. That's the vibe that I got. And then ironically, through life, I ended up right in the heart of Tallahassee as a Gator fan. My wife's a Crimson Tide fan. So I just take it on the chin, and I had for 20 years. But whatever, man. We're a basketball school now. And I specifically told Devin, don't bring me on until we do something good. And we made the Final Four, so here we are. I can show my face.
Have a little bit of pride.
That's right. Have something to celebrate because, it's been a minute football-wise, which I'm sure we'll get into. But, yeah, I'm 20 years I have known and known about Teen Challenge. I grew up, like I said, great home, great family, went to high school. Played basketball in high school, ended up playing some Division II college basketball, and every chance in the world to succeed. And I grew up, my family, were Christians. My dad struggled with alcohol right up until I was about the 7th or 8th grade and gave his life over to the Lord. He was just from a different generation where he could, put the bottle down and stop. And I just couldn't do it. And really through high school, I was good until I got to college. But I was at that weird place in life where, I had this potential and I had these, opportunities and I didn't know who I was, and I couldn't find myself. I knew I wasn't on the right path, but, it was the the right girl, right relationship, whatever it was, as many times as I was in church, it just never stuck. And so my junior year of high school, got injured and had the grade 3 sprain on my ankle, and I got introduced to painkillers. And Devin knows me really well. I just don't have an off button. Once I get started, I'm not a quitter. And I go out and party with some of my friends, and they at 12, 1 o'clock, they were ready to go home. And man, I was just kind of getting started. And I think if you were to have gone to my hometown and talked to people that knew me, pre-drug addiction, I don't think that anybody would have, guessed that my life was going to turn out the way that it did, or end up in the places that I did. But I mean, we just live in this world where, the farther we go, the longer we go, the greater access that people have, to things. So what started as, drinking and marijuana and pain pills turned into heroin and crack cocaine and, everything else. And so I just kind of ran the gambit. I really didn't care what it was. There came a point in life where I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't have the ability to stop. And so, I would just mask all that depression and anxiety and all these things and just get high, don't have to feel it, don't have to deal with it, whatever I could just to, not do it. So a decade, in, I look in the mirror and I'm like, dang, man, my life is in ruins. And this was never the plan. It was always supposed to be just, fun. It was always supposed to be just taking the edge off. And, like I said at the beginning, it was not the person that had an off button. And I tried a bunch of programs. I did the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day cycle. Devin and I have a lot in common. We tried a lot of programs prior to coming to Teen Challenge. I was 11 deep. Teen Challenge was my 11th program. And I remember I was dating this girl. We weren't in a real relationship. It was just more of a, drug partnership. And she had 3 kids. One was young, 8 months old. And I remember holding this baby in this apartment and thinking to myself, dang, man, the best chance this kid has at making it in this world is if I'm not part of it. And, I never really lost that like tenderness about myself. I always felt like I was a good person. I wasn't, but I tried to convince myself that I was. And, I remember that moment. It's like, dang, man, I got to do something different. I don't want my life to end up this way. And so I was 28 and called an aunt who I had stolen from, and, really did terrible. She's the only member of my family that would even talk to me. And I called her. I was just like, hey, Aunt Pam, I'm ready for something different. And so she took me back to a rehab that I'd already been to 3 times and knew it wasn't the answer, but I just needed a place. In the life of an addict, in the moment of an addict, there's this very, very small window of clarity that it's like, when I'm ready, I got to jump on that, because if I wait an hour, that feeling is going to eventually go away. And all I would do is, go fill it with something else. I would get creative. I would find another way to steal something or pawn something or connive, manipulate, whatever it was. But thankfully I had someone who was ready to answer that call. And so she took me to this place, made some phone calls from there. And sure enough, years before, I had heard about this place called Teen Challenge from a friend of mine who I was on a work site with. I've worked construction all my life just to, feed the fix. And I remember him telling me about, Teen Challenge and how it really helped him. And it was in Pensacola, Florida. And here I am in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's February. It's cold. And just randomly, whenever he told me that, I had gone home and told my mom, hey, there's this program this guy went to called Teen Challenge. I wasn't sober, but I was playing sober. And, I told her, like, if I ever go back again, maybe look at this place. Again, a year-long program ain't where you start. Certainly not what I want. I had no intentions on going, but it was just kind of to savor that moment for a minute. And sure enough, I was in this other program. My mom showed up to this. I hadn't seen her for 6 months. I hear this knock on the door. And this was one of those programs that, as long as you weren't, using, hardcore drugs, crack, or, heroin, then you would consider yourself sober. So we were smoking weed in the living room of this program. And a knock on the door. And a friend of mine's name was Saul at the time. And I was like, hey, Saul, man, get up and go get that door. He's like, no, I'm not getting it, man. I'm too high. And I was like, all right, whatever. I get up, answer the door. My mom standing at that door. I hadn't talked to her in 6 months. Again, put her through the absolute ringer. She had every reason in the world to give up on me. And when she answered the door, I'm pale white, my jaw fell to the ground, and she was just like, "Hey, if you're ready to change, if you actually want to change, there's a place called Teen Challenge, and you got to go now." And thought for a second, I was like, "All right, man, whatever it takes." And here I was, the only Teen Challenge I had ever heard of at that time was in Pensacola, Florida. So I think I'm like, look, man, at least I get a vacation, head down to the beach for a couple months, whatever. I'll figure it out from there. But they sent me to Muskegon, Michigan. Yeah, Western Michigan, right on the lake. And I at that moment I realized, oh my gosh, there's more than one of these things. But I met God at an altar. It wasn't, again, it wasn't some profound divine, something that happened that had never, I knew about God. I knew who God was. I was just in a place in my life where I was like, man, I'd heard so many times, once an addict, always an addict. This is how you're ever going to be. And I was resigned to that, level of hopelessness. And, I thought to myself, man, if this gives me a 1% chance to change my life, that's infinitely greater than the 0% chance that I had given myself to that point. And, gave my heart to the Lord on that altar for real. And from that moment on, I haven't been perfect. God knows, I still make mistakes all the time. Anyone who knows me knows, I wrote the book on how to fail. But since that moment, I've had a hope that is different than anything else I've ever experienced. And I used to show up to, NA meetings and just ask constantly, man, I'm Austin, I'm an addict, and I don't know how to not want to feel the way that drugs made me feel. And because they did make me feel good, they did take away that, whatever pain it was, for that moment. The problem was sometimes it was a couple minutes, sometimes it was a couple hours. That need and that desire to refill on whatever that substance was kept coming up. And I always had to chase and chase and chase. But there was a moment in the program that I experienced what the true peace of God felt like. It was, a small moment to most, but a big moment to me. It was about a phone call. And, but I got to feel what the peace of God, Bob says, the peace of God that passes, all understanding. I got to feel that for a minute. And I was like, man, that I've replaced that chase of the feeling that drugs gave me to the feeling that gave me. And I realized I don't have to lie and steal and manipulate to refill on that feeling. All I have to do is call on the name of Jesus. And, and so that's the feeling I've been chasing, ever since. And like I said, there's been highs and lows, but, if you never struggle, you're not really doing it. And, but yeah, thankful obviously to the Lord for, sparing me in my life on the millionth time that I said, God, if you'll just get me out of this, I'll do this, and never filled, my end of that promise. But I'm grateful to Teen Challenge. We'll get into it more in a minute, but just an incredible place, man. Teen Challenge isn't what changed me, but it certainly was an organization that gave me an opportunity to experience God in a way that I could have never done, otherwise. If I had the power to do it, I would have done it. It was never a lack of wanting to get sober. I just didn't have the tools to accomplish it. And it wasn't, until I experienced the power of the Lord and the time that Teen Challenge offered me that gave me that chance. So eternally grateful.
Yeah, man. It sounds a lot like what I was talking about when I was giving my testimony. They mentioned that in the chat, that we kind of sound alike there. But man, when Jesus affects your life like that, there's a certain part of it that's going to be similar, and that similar part is Jesus. And I tell people, man, for those, I brought up pictures, man. I've showed you the picture when I was in the coma, and the picture like when I was on the bus to Oklahoma, when you put me on the bus to go to Oklahoma. I pulled that picture up. And then I had a picture of me now, like with my shirt off and stuff. And I'm like, I'm not trying to show off here, but for those of you that say I don't believe in Jesus because I can't see Jesus, well, you can see him in two people's lives right here, man. Like, and it's just from hopelessness to hope, dude. You brought up the peace too, man. And another thing I tell people is, like, a lot of people get thrown off because you think that when you start following Jesus, life is going to get easier. It gets harder, actually, but it's just the battles that you're fighting that are harder to fight. they're way more worth it, and you're fighting for the good and not for the evil.
Right.
And it just changes things. So it's beautiful, man. It's been a wild ride, dude. If we could sit here and talk about our interactions back and forth.
Yeah.
Austin got his stuff together way quicker than I did, so he got to watch me go in and out and in and out and in and out. And there's been there's some stories that probably only me and him will know forever. But that's
right.
okay.
That's right.
But yeah, man. So Teen Challenge, I love the way you brought Teen Challenge up, man. An imperfect program for imperfect people to lead you to a perfect God, man. It's not perfect. I'm sure if you have heard of Teen Challenge, you've probably heard somebody give blessings for it. You've probably heard somebody tear them apart. That's just what it is, man. But it's a place to slow you down just enough, right, to meet somebody that's spectacular, and that's Jesus. So let people know what you do. What are you up to right now, man? What do you do?
Yeah. So when I went to Teen Challenge as a student, 2011, I graduated in 2012, and I knew once I was there. Here I was, 28 years old, no real direction that my life was going to go into. I don't know how many times I thought through the years that, the whatever real opportunity I had was gone, whether it was to be I could never be a doctor, could never be a lawyer. I used to say I wanted to be three things. I wanted to teach, I wanted to coach, and I wanted to get involved in counseling. Those were the three. From a kid, from a very, in middle school, I remember telling the people that that's what I wanted to do. And so, I was thankful. And you said it, man. A quick Google search of Teen Challenge, you'll hear people say it's the greatest thing that's ever been invented, and you'll hear people tell you that it is the worst place you could ever, set your foot in and stay away from as long as you could. Anyways, I had both good and bad staff members while I was at Teen Challenge as a student. And I remember thinking to myself, man, these guys have so much influence, and, and they were giving back to the ministry that helped them. And so it started as a 6-month commitment. I said, all right, man, 6 months. I'm going to do this internship. At that time, it was, totally unpaid. You didn't get a stipend. You didn't get paycheck. You had a place to live. And that was it. And so you had to kind of raise some sponsors to help you support yourself while you were there. And so, but that's where it started. Was I said, all right, man, I'm going to do this internship in 2012, and here we are, 2025. And I just never, I just kept saying yes, to that. And so, I've worked my way up from unpaid intern to janitor to maintenance guy, teacher, vocational coordinator. And in 2018, I got married to my wife, Cassidy, who's also a Teen Challenge graduate. And her story is, equal to mine, and how God found her in a very broken place and put us together. And so 2018, December, we got asked to be directors of the men's center in Tallahassee, and accepted that, moved to Tallahassee in 2018, took over as executive directors of the men's center. And in December of 23, just got an off the wall phone call that asked us if we wanted to switch to the adolescent side of Teen Challenge. And so Teen Challenge made up two different divisions. You have adults, that is men, women. There's some women with children's centers, and then adolescents, which is 11 to 17, adolescent boys, adolescent girls. And one of the things that I've noticed through the years of working with Teen Challenge is the age of the student just kept getting younger. That it was like, man, when I went at 28, I felt like I was one of the younger guys. I was seeing these guys in their 40s and 50s and 60s, and I'm like, dang, man, this, I'm a baby in this place. And now you walk into an adult center, and at 28, I would be right smack in the middle of the average, if not on the older side. And this generation that is, coming up, the access they have is just unprecedented to whatever it is that they want. And then you have the synthetic drugs that they're coming up with. And, I remember, so I turn 42 next week. So, I'm old, but not that
Golly,
old.
Yeah, you are, bro. That's wild.
But, so when I was in high school, you had, a group of people, not many. I went to a school that had about 1,200 kids. So, not huge, but not small either. And there was only a certain pocket of kids that were like the stoners that were smoking and drinking. And, nobody ever really used, hard drugs in high school unless you broke into your grandma's medicine cabinet or whatever it was. But, I hearing the testimonies of men that I was working with, that it's just like, yeah, man, I started when I was 13, or I started when I was 12. And that just, I slowly developed this burden for, helping adolescents and helping kids. And so like I said, out of the middle of nowhere, my bosses called me and said there was a job opening up in Vero Beach, Florida, at the Adolescent Teen Challenge Center. And originally I was not going to take it. I was like, man, adults is my thing. I identify with adults because I was that person coming up through. But, I didn't want to be disrespectful to my bosses because they believed in me a long time ago, and I feel a strong sense of loyalty to them. But then, yeah, out of nowhere, I just, let me pray about it. Well, let's go see it, and my wife and I, conversation after conversation, it's just like, it just got to the point where we went and visited, and on our way back, we were like, hey, man, we're actually going to do this. I remember calling you and being like, dang, man, I think I'm, for whatever reason, switching over to deal with teenagers. And you were like, you're crazy. And I'm sitting here right now. I'm telling you, I am crazy. But yeah, so we went to Vero Beach in January of 24. In September of 24, they merged two adolescent programs, which was our center in Vero Beach and the adolescent program in Bonifay, Florida, and combined to make one center. And then my wife and I were asked to be executive directors over that. So currently executive director over Gateway Boys Academy in Bonifay. And yeah, we've got a little over 40 kids, 40 adolescent boys ranging from 11 to 17, and just trying to teach them, who Christ is in the world today, who he is for them personally. And it is satisfying in ways that, you're going to save some kids from the carnage, because that's a lot of what, addiction leaves, is this wake of destruction that by the time they were getting to us at the men's centers, you've got 10, 15, 20 years of, carnage of, fathers being separated from their wives, or fathers not being able to see their kids. And, to the thought of, if we can jump on this on the front end, if we can reach these boys prior to that, man, what a difference, we can make. And teenagers, anyone in the chat that has kids, that's a tough nut to crack. But if you can crack it, man, you're altering the destiny of a young man's life to, especially again, in the drug culture and the, border stuff and, fentanyl coming across the border. I mean, it's Russian roulette that people play with their life, every substance that you put in your body. And, again, being in my, early teens and 20s as a drug addict, I kind of knew what I was getting if I would, call somebody and say, hey, I want this specific drug. Most of the time I was getting exactly what I was asking for. And today, from what I understand, stories of, these kids and adults, it's not that anymore. Fentanyl and everything. It takes a molecule to kill you. And, so you're saving, again, changing the trajectory of a young man's life, potentially saving their life long enough to have the Lord get a hold of their heart. So yeah, we've been directors now for 6.5 years. And, I just can't imagine a world where I'm not always with Teen Challenge, because, this is where God wants us, and this is where God's called us. I've asked many times, God, if there's anything else you'd like for me to do, I'm down for it. But he just keeps saying no. So I keep saying yes.
Yeah, man. Dude, the world just keeps getting crazier and wilder. And you brought up the different drugs that are out there, but even more than that, man, like, the drugs is a side effect of the real issue, and the world is just getting so much better at just distracting people from blessings in front of them, from reality. And if you just get distracted long enough, that temptation's going to get put in front of you. And then it takes one, man. You do it once, you're going to do it again, and you're off to the races. So again, man, I really wanted you guys to hear from Austin. You heard my testimony. You've heard his testimonies. You heard about Teen Challenge. I mean that when I say that, half our super chats, they go there. So anybody that's ever done that, now you guys because there's a lot of different teen challenge centers that this money could get sent to. But this is the particular one that it will be sent to. So it's an adolescent boys center there with 40 some kids, like Austin said. And any little bit helps. If you guys feel led to do that, that would be greatly appreciated. But I wanted you guys to first and foremost hear the testimony, man. And if you guys know somebody that is struggling, adult or adolescent, I always tell you guys, man, shoot me an email. There's a really good chance I can find them help, because I went through the ringer myself. And my first call will be to this gentleman right here on this screen, be like, hey, yo, Austin, I got this thing going on. Where can we get these people? We can find somewhere for them to go if they really, really want help. So, Austin, I appreciate you sharing that, man. God is, dude, it's just so wild to me where I was and where I'm at now and what God can actually do in people's lives. With as stubborn as I was and as stubborn as you were as well, if God could reach us and actually change our hearts, like for real, then he can help anybody. So I love
that's
it,
right.
man. And it's kind of wild too, because most of our relationship, man, has consisted of me trying to get freaking right, bro. So every time we're having conversations, I mean, there's a lot of good times in it too, but I say that because, I mean, we never got to talk much football. Like it was from time to time, but like it never was a long span long enough. And by the time that happened, you know, you're at an adolescent center, man. So this is what God does, man. Brings things back full circle, because I love this. Because you want to talk chat, you want to talk about somebody that can, I mean, who's like a statistician in their head. It's Austin right here, dude. The stuff he talks about in sports, I used to listen to him talk about it and be like, wow, dude, this dude's crazy about it. And now I'm just, dude, Austin, I watch film from 2028 recruits. Like that's what I do now in my spare time too. But Studley, thank you so much for the $49.99. God bless you both. We appreciate that, Studley. Appreciate your support. Watch our channel all the time, man. You're always on here. So, man, hopefully this helps somebody, man. Spread this message along. Spread God's testimony in both of our lives. Share it, man. Get it out there so people can see what God can do. But now to dive in.
I just want to say something else, Devin. And you know, as he said, like the connections that you build throughout the course of, you know, time. I want to emphasize, it does not matter, you know, where you are. I've been to 6 different countries in Latin America with Teen Challenge and going and doing service projects. And so, you know, I mean, I just know, you know, the people in the Pacific Northwest are some of my, you know, best friends. The divisional leader for adult programs in the Pacific Northwest is a great friend of mine. All over the Southeast, again, you know, in the Midwest with, you know, the Oklahoma centers. I just, when you go through this and you meet like-minded people that, you know, are willing to and want to help, don't ever feel like you're in that place where it's like, well, you know, those guys are all the way out in Florida and I'm in Oregon. You know, I just, you know, they couldn't help me. It's literally just a phone call away. And, you know, that's ultimately why, you know, I do what I do. And I know it's a huge part of what Devin does. It's just about helping people find, you know, that the same thing that we have. This isn't some magic potion that's concocted that's only for us. I remember being an addict and thinking, well, this what worked for them will never work for me. They don't know my story. And it's like, that's one of the things the enemy wants you to believe is that very simple lie that you're different. And, you know, and we are all created in the image of God, but man, that salvation that has kept myself and Devin this long is the exact same. By the Spirit of God, the same Spirit of God that rose Christ Jesus from the dead is the same one that lives in us. And it's the same one that's available for you or your family member or your friend or whoever it is that you know that's struggling. And it's that first step is the hardest step. But when you've got people that are willing to take that step with you, it just makes all the difference in the world. So I just wanted to let you know, I ain't nobody special, but I just met a lot of really cool people along the way. So, you know, just don't feel like you can't, because it's there.
Yeah, bro, I have been, I mean, Austin see me at my worst, broke. And I mean, I don't know how I had a car at the time, but I've literally been bussed and flown all over the country by Austin and family members and different things. So there is nobody out of reach. Especially when Jesus is involved. It don't matter who, what, when, where, why, what situation. I promise you, dude, Austin has heard many, and I've heard many testimonies, every kind of testimony you can think of, man. And there's a good chance. I mean, I've been through a lot in life. Austin has too. And these are brief testimonies of just a couple battles that God has helped us overcome. Drug addiction being a very minuscule one in the grand scheme of things. Because like I said, I mean, it's a symptom of our issue. You know what I mean? So the God getting you clean is the easy part. Keeping you clean is the difficult part. That's when the grinding comes.
That's right.
Sean wants to know, like, the most important 3 steps that are important to me daily. Well, I'll tell you this, man. Teen Challenge, very disciplined, the adult program. So it's when you get up, you make your bed, you do your devotion, you eat, you do chores, you go out, you work, then you come back and you do some classes, you learn about Jesus, you fellowship with your fellow people that are in there. So, I mean, first and foremost, it's recognizing that, and this might sound cliche, but anything that I put in front of the Lord, I'm going to lose. It's going to happen. I'm going to lose it. You know what I mean? My business that I own is called One Way Services, not because I want people to think that I'm some great Christian person. That's for me to understand that the second that I put money and business above my relationship with the Lord, which I have done before, and I have faced the consequence for that, like recently, that because I'm a human being, that's important, man. So my first most important step, the message that God has put on my heart more than anything, is to never forget where I came from. Like, Austin's probably heard me say that 100 million times, dude, but it's all throughout the Bible. But dude, it's the little things, man. Like, get up, make your bed. I fail at that probably 2-3 times a week. I'll still get up and make my bed, though, for the most part. I still clean and do laundry and all those things, but I make time for the Lord. And then this is my most important one that is actually, I can incorporate it in my everyday life, is helping other people. Like, that's it for me. Be selfless. If I go a week without doing it, or 2 weeks with saying no to somebody, or I told you guys, not putting my card away after I get groceries or little stuff like that, that's just me. Everybody's different. I know that I'm in trouble if I don't get back on course with trying to reach out and help other people, or getting involved in ministry and picking my word up every single day and doing it. It's those little things, man, for me. So it's a lot in one, you know, I think I said more than 3 steps there, but Austin, you got 3 steps, dude?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I've, really challenged myself in recently is to make a list of things that I'm grateful for and go over that list every single day. Because again, I have 2 toddlers, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. I'm involved in, full-time ministry, especially with adolescents. And, I hold the role of counselor, executive director, direct care staff. I'm just whatever I can do to, whatever's got to be done, that's what I'm willing to do. And so I could find myself get super impatient or, negative, or whatever it is, a staff member. Dev and I were just talking before we jumped on the air about, having to find good staff members, and, what their outlook on jobs and life is very different than it was years ago. So it's, I think, making a grateful for list and making sure that before my feet hit the floor, I look at that list and start myself on the course of gratefulness today, because God knows, whether it's me or you or anybody else, we are not where we deserve to be. And if we take a very objective look at life, if we have breath in our body, we're fortunate. And, Bible says wages of sin is death. And, I certainly have missed the mark. And so, making sure that I just stay in that place of thankfulness and gratefulness, so gratefulness list is one. The other big thing, you said it, discipline. I make sure that I have a community, and it can't be, we have, all of us have a million acquaintances in our life, but everybody's got to have, in my opinion, those 2 or 3 people that you can just vomit and be totally gut level honest with. I can't be that way with everybody because, it's not that I, am dishonest with them, but not everybody's earned the right or earned that trust to really have, look, man, I can call this person on any given moment and just unload on, because I know that they'll tell me the truth. I know that, they'll speak life to the darkness that's, within me. And
Amen.
we've all got blind spots. Every one of us do. We've all got areas that we are, we don't see it in ourselves because our views are very subjective, right? Because we're in the flesh, we see things through our perspective. And but finding those 2 or 3 people that, even if I don't see it, even if I don't see me veering from the path, if this certain specific person tells me that it's there, it's because it's there, because they have earned the right to have real insight in my life. And so, I think, again, surrounding yourself with people that you could be honest with, staying grateful. And the last one is exactly what you said, Devin, making your bed, starting with making your bed. We learned it a long time ago, but it's just that sense of accomplishment that you feel. And it's a super small but important part of your day.
Yeah. I should have had that speech ready that I used to play in Teen Challenge devotions all the time for the students about that Navy SEAL guy or whatever. He gave that speech about making his bed, man. That's a good one. I'm going to pull that up for these guys one day. Russ, thank you so much for the 1999. Great stuff. God bless you guys. Appreciate you, Russ, for the support, no doubt. But yeah, just one note, and then we can move on to football, man. You were talking, and it really, kind of hit me. We've had this conversation several times, but it's like you need to have friends in your life that sometimes don't feel like friends in the moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. When you're telling them something and they're telling you what you don't want to hear, like you call and tell them what you did, and instead of saying it's going to be okay, they're like, hey, that's not okay. You better do something different in your life, or it's gonna, you know what I mean? You got to have those people in your life. But really good stuff, man. God is good. Again, if you guys know anybody that needs any help, shoot me an email. You guys know what it is. Appreciate you sharing all that, Austin. So let's dive into it, man. Ohio State, dude. I don't know if you see that or not, but we're the national champs. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It happened for us this year. But I don't want to start with them. I know you're not a big Ohio State guy, but I do want to ask you about college football in general. You mentioned earlier talking about Florida, how college football has changed on the field, right?
Yeah.
The way that the sport is played. Well, now we're seeing something completely different, and that is nil, something that I believe should have happened a long time ago. But they did it, and they didn't put any safeguards on it. So nil in the transfer portal. Just talk to us about your thoughts on that and what it's doing to college football right now.
Yeah, you said it. It would have been great for this to actually happen 10 years ago, when the viable argument of paying college athletes was there, and maybe we could have worked some of that stuff out. But, now what you're seeing is free agency. That's we've turned into, a professional sport light where, we brought up, as a Gator fan, Jalen Rashada, who was committed to Florida at a time that we were desperate for life to be, breathed into the program, and Napier was still, new, and we were waiting for him to make a big splash. And, he signed Rashada, and that was kind of, we were like, all right, man, we've got, top recruiting prospects, 5-star guy, really going to breathe life. And it's not just him. And then it's who he attracts. And because a car dealership, offered him $1 million and then backed out on it, he, leaves to go to Arizona State, and just a situation like that leaves a program, in shambles. And so, one of the things that I loved about the sanctity of college football was watching a kid come in and, struggle. And a lot of times you wouldn't know who these guys are till they're, sophomore or junior year when they've worked their way, up. And so it's like, now it's just who can you get from the portal to, it's always win now. And it's, to me, it's tainted in a sense that, however, that's coaches have been doing a lot longer than players have. And, where they'll sign, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, special teams coach, and they're just waiting for that next opportunity. And so now players are basically doing what coaches have done, for years. And so I was, again, Cassidy being, my wife being a huge Alabama fan, I point to, yeah, I know. Listen, it's rough over here. I point to Jalen Hurts and again, I'm also a Chiefs fan, so watching them get crushed in the Super Bowl hurt me dearly. But Jalen Hurts is a great example of, he started as a freshman, won the starting job outright, played great his freshman year, midway through his sophomore year. Tua had gotten signed, and they were in the SEC championship game or national championship game. Jalen Hurts laying an egg, gets benched at halftime. Tua comes in, comes back, beats Georgia in overtime. I mean, just one of the greatest college football national championship games of all time. And the thought is Jalen Hurts is gone, right? There's no way he's going to stick around. He's not going to be able to overtake Tua, but he stayed. And in the SEC championship game that year, Tua gets hurt. Jalen Hurts, because he stayed, was in position to come in, win the SEC championship. And I remember telling Cassidy, that's the character of a person that I'm going to tell my kids about, because that's the way it used to be. And those stories now are just gone because it is just next best opportunity. And that ability to fight through adversity is just super, it's hindered now because of the sick. Now, I don't know that college football can stay this way. There's got to be, like you said, a governor put on, and that's going to hurt. And then it's about, in essence, best idea wins. But at the same time, it's harder to be a fan now than I feel like it was 10 years ago, because roster turnover and, like I said, NIL, transfer portal, you're losing 40% of your roster before spring practice even starts from the year before. So to coach, we were talking about Billy Napier, and it's funny how, Ryan Day and Billy Napier were both in a very similar position going into the end of the year, where I thought they were both toast. A true changing of the guard. Napier's had several years. Florida just can't get relevant, and they have moments each year, but they're, and they'll get preseason ranked, but they've just been irrelevant since Tim Tebow, in all honesty, minus a couple of years with Kyle Trask. But even then, making it to the SEC championship game was a huge, accomplishment and a program that should be chasing national titles. But Ohio State, after they lost to Michigan, I thought he was gone. Won a few, but then gets hot at the right time, and now he's, etched in for as long as he wants to be. Napier was struggling. I thought he was gone. And then they beat LSU, Ole Miss at the end of the year. Now he's set up for at least another couple of years. So the way that this whole thing can change on a dime is very different, again, now than it ever will be. So it's super interesting, but from a very different perspective now than what it was, 10 years ago.
Yeah, dude, it's way different. And I obviously, I pay a lot of attention to Ohio State and Ryan Day, and that's why I hound on how important it is for a head coach to create culture. Has always been important for a team, but now more than ever, because of NIL and because of the transfer portal, you better have a culture set up in your program.
Yes.
I mean, that better be number one, because there's not much other reason for kids to stay that don't get playing time. You know what I mean? Because okay, so you have the development thing. It's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, me being an Ohio State fan, I'm going to say Ohio State can develop every position better than other ones. The truth is, there's a lot of colleges that can develop different players at different positions at very high levels. There just is. So it's like the development reason, kids can transfer and go wherever for that. The money reason, there's a lot of people paying a lot of money to play. The playing time reason, Well, shoot, man, if you're at a big time college like Ohio State, dude, you're probably going to be on the bench waiting to play for a while. So you better have a reason for these players to stay. Before, it was a lot harder to up and leave. You had to sit out a year, or you had to go through this or that. And not only that, you had to find a way to, I know certain players have been getting money, but I mean, financially, it put a burden on you to get up and just pack and leave and go somewhere. So now all those excuses are gone. Yeah. I think now more than ever, it comes down to culture. And
I agree. I fully agree. And that's where, you have these, dominant programs that they're a brand in and of themselves, right? Yep. Ohio State is a brand. Florida is a brand. And so it's like there's enough there for the initial draw to get you there. And I think you're going to, again, going to these, Super Four conferences, I think you're just going to keep seeing that gap widen, because when you have culture and money, you're going to be it's going to be tough for somebody to crack, into that next level of, competition. I think you're seeing it with basketball this year, and the death of the Cinderella story. Here we are. I think first time since 2008, you've got all 4 number 1 seeds, and I think you're making it harder, even with an expanded playoff in college football. I think you're just going to make it harder for that Cinderella run to happen, because again, you're backing the brand with money. And it was like, man, these kids would just give everything in their heart because they're trying to earn a check at the next level. And it's like, well, what does that do when you've already got that money? There's a boxer, Marvin Hagler, who used to say it's hard to get up and pound the pavement when you're waking up in silk sheets. And he was guarding against success. And I think you're going to see that with, I think you said it, the way that the game is played on the field is very different, now. And so it's like there's this evolution going on that it ain't going to stop. You get somebody like me that says, oh, man, I wish they would play it like they used to. They're not going to. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So how quickly can your program adjust to the changing times? We were talking about, Billy Napier coming from Louisiana, and, a smaller school. And that was the route to college head coaching, is you want to do really well at these smaller schools and you win there. And it's, you're winning with less talent. You're being competitive when you play these, bigger Division I schools. And now you're almost set up for, a coach who can manage, a salary cap and a roster at a high level. You're far more suited for the college game now than, a guy who's trying to navigate, mid-major college football. So it is a true evolution of the game that, you'll look back on 25 years and look at this stretch and say, dang, man, that, there's no going back, that was when it started.
Yeah, for sure. So going to wrap it up at here, but I'm going to hit you with 2 things because I want to get an outside perspective on the crazy Ohio State fan base. And when I say that, I am 100% one of those, man. I think Ohio State is the best of the best and forever will always be. Like, it's just wild. But so we watched Ryan Day lose to the rival last year, and I believe culture won us that national title. Is that who is that? Well, hi. How are you?
You're in my headphones.
Oh, dang, man. Oh,
this is Wyatt. Yeah, this is Wyatt. Oh. He's 3. He just doesn't cut his hair.
Look at Wyatt's hair, dude. It looks like freaking. I was like, dang, dude. Adelie looks. She's so young, man.
Will you get Adelie? I'll show you. This will really blow your mind.
Yeah, I just got really confused right there, dude. That was
cool. Yeah. No, that's Wyatt. He's 3. And he's a handful. Look at this one.
Well, hi, Adelie.
You remember Uncle Devin? Yeah.
Hi. So we used to go chase the geese together.
We sure did. You caught your first fish with Devin out on the docks in the Florida Keys. All right, get out of here. Let's finish up.
But yeah, so
All right, go ahead.
so Ohio State won national title. We here we consider it the greatest run in college football. The playoffs. Granted, it was the first 12-team playoff. We had the first opportunity to do that, but I mean,
Sure.
we went through the gauntlet. Long story short, we're predicting a Saban-like run for Ryan Day, and I want to hear your honest take on an Ohio State fan that believes that. What do you think?
My initial reaction is that's impossible. With the way that, again, so there is still parity, but I think the parity is at the very top. And one of the things that that Saban did such a good job of was not just, especially pre like Lane Kiffin, you started seeing more coaching turnover. But prior to Lane Kiffin, he kept his coaching staff together and he kept players in school. And to be able to do that is going to be very, very difficult. So where I think there's a huge chasm that's going to be between the top 20 programs in the country. I think Ohio State will have the chance to be there every year.
Yeah.
Can you have the consistency of players and coaches that are going to yield that type of success? I think it's going to be impossible, but I do think, again, Ohio State is, it hurts me to say it, but they are in that upper echelon of they're going to have the top picks of the top talent every single year because, the Texas schools, the SEC schools, they've got that well that doesn't run dry financially. And, so you've got a real opportunity at it. It would shock me if somebody put together a run like Saban have.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I guess it's just your opinion because the main reason for me getting that feeling is the coaching hires that Ryan Day made this year. Matt Patricia,
Sure.
Tyler Bowen coming in. Like that is why I get that feeling. But I'm well aware of how difficult that would be in this day and age. My final thing for you is about this right here. I know you don't follow it like I do, and what I call him scum has been caught up in with the cheating scandal. I just informed you about Matt Weiss, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. Michigan got caught cheating. They got caught pre-scouting, right? Do you know much about that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Your thoughts. You're not in. You don't got any weight in this rival. Nothing. You could care less what happens to him. What should happen to him, man?
They should get a minimum of the death penalty. The college football death penalty, and because again, you're talking about ruining the sanctity of competition. And I get it in a sense. You're not cheating, you're not trying, and that there's somewhat of like that's just kind of how the world's gone in a sense. But they are, again, you said it. It's the tip of the iceberg. By the time look at the Patriots, by the time you get caught, you've gotten so comfortable in doing things a certain way that once you crack that nut, it just falls open. So I would not be surprised at anything that came out from the Michigan football program. But I do. I mean, a reduction of scholarships. I think you're looking at a 3 to 5 year postseason ban, because if you don't, here's the thing: if you don't, you are setting other teams up to do the same thing. If it's a slap on the wrist, then you're going to see other programs start doing it, because at the end of the day, it's etched in history. You're chasing national championships that, people are willing to sell souls and whatever else to get that. It's like, okay, so if all I've got to face is this huge fine, the small scholarship reduction, and a postseason ban for a year, a national championship, you forget it's worth it. It's worth all that.
Yeah.
But if we're already tinkering on, the ethics behind the student athlete and amateurism and all that stuff with this NIL stuff. But when you're ruining the competitive part of what it is. I mean, that's what it should always be. I prepare, you prepare, we line up against each other in the best man win, and we shake hands at the end. If you're ruining the sanctity of competition and you don't do something big, you're just inviting it to continue to happen.
Yeah, 100%. You probably, what you just did there is you probably added a lot of people to the Gators fan list.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's several people in the chat that are like, "Oh, heck yeah, dude."
Yeah.
But yeah, man,
Yeah.
I feel you. That's been talked about a lot. Ohio State fans always get told, "Hey, man, you guys are just got your blinders on because of the rivalry." And I'm pretty good at separating myself from those emotions.
Yeah.
And you just take the cheating and you look at how that affected real people's real lives. CJ Stroud probably would have won a couple Heismans if he would have won on the field without the cheating. Like, you never know, but that's the problem is now we never will know. And you don't know how it affected a kid mentally because they prepared so hard. They thought they over prepared. They go out and they face an opponent that cheated. You know what I mean? And they didn't know they were cheating. And they just thought, well, I guess I'm not that good. I just tried everything I could and I still lost. I must be a bum. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that part gets glossed over so much because we get so caught up in the football aspect of it. What's more important to me is what this did, because I know how competitive I am, and you do as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I was withdrawing from drugs out on the basketball court trying to win every single game.
I remember that.
But yeah, it was bad. But I mean, dude, when you're an athlete, dude, the games and the score of a game can determine your life, bro. And whether that's healthy or not healthy is irrelevant. It is what
100%.
it is in the moment.
That is it.
You know what I'm saying?
That is it.
So,
that is it.
wow. But hey, brother, I appreciate you, man. We're going to have to get you back on here another time.
100%.
Yeah, huge blessing, man. I just love this opportunity God has presented me. Talk Ohio State football, get on here with friends, talk about Jesus and football at the same time. I love it, man. So I appreciate you, man. You got any final words for our listeners?
No, appreciate all you guys. Again, you know, when you're sewn into, you know, the Ministry of Teen Challenge, it's it's not an organization, it's a life. And, you know, a life that's represented by myself and Devin here today. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate the support you're showing. My boy couldn't support a better dude. So love you guys.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Well, on that note, we appreciate you guys watching. We love you guys. Go Buckeyes. I'm not going to get an IO from Austin, but OH. Chad, I know you're saying it. Take care, everybody.